Two roads diverged in a wood and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. By working faithfully 8 hours a day you may eventually get to be boss and work 12 hours a day. Education is the ability to listen to almost anything without losing your temper or your self-confidence. The woods are lovely, dark and deep. But I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep. A bank is a place where they lend you an umbrella in fair weather and ask for it back when it begins to rain. A person will sometimes devote all his life to the development of one part of his body, the wishbone. The greatest thing in family life is to take a hint when a hint is intended and not to take a hint when a hint isn't intended. I never dared to be radical when young for fear it would make me conservative when old. Half the world is composed of people who have something to say and can, and the other half who have nothing to say and keep on saying it. A diplomat is a man who always remembers a woman's birthday but never remembers her age. Poetry is when an emotion has found its thought and the thought has found words. A mother takes 20 years to make a man of her boy, and another woman makes a fool of him in 20 minutes. Forgive me my nonsense, as I also forgive the nonsense of those that think they talk sense. The brain is a wonderful organ. It starts working the moment you get up in the morning and does not stop until you get into the office. Half the world is composed of people who have something to say and can, and the other half who have nothing to say and keep on saying it. We dance round in a ring and suppose, but the secret sits in the middle and knows. A poem begins as a lump in the throat, a sense of wrong, a homesickness, a lovesickness. A civilized society is one which tolerates eccentricity to the point of doubtful sanity. The reason why worry kills more people than work is that more people worry than work. No tears in the writer, no tears in the reader. No surprise in the writer, no surprise in the reader. It's a funny thing that when a man hasn't anything on earth to worry about, he goes off and gets married. Most of the change we think we see in life is due to truths being in and out of favor. I have never started a poem yet whose end I knew. Writing a poem is discovering. There never was any heart truly great and generous, that was not also tender and compassionate. If society fits you comfortably enough, you call it freedom. The middle of the road is where the white line is, and that's the worst place to drive. Modern poets talk against business, poor things, but all of us write for money. Beginners are subjected to trial by market. Style is that which indicates how the writer takes himself and what he is saying. It is the mind skating circles around itself as it moves forward. I often say of George Washington that he was one of the few in the whole history of the world who was not carried away by power. The worst disease which can afflict executives in their work is not, as popularly supposed, alcoholism, it's egotism. You can be a little ungrammatical if you come from the right part of the country. Let him that is without stone among you cast the first thing he can lay his hands on. I am a writer of books in retrospect. I talk in order to understand, I teach in order to learn. They would not find me changed from him they knew, only more sure of all I thought was true. I would have written of me on my stone, I had a lover's quarrel with the world. I alone of English writers have consciously set myself to make music out of what I may call the sound of sense. You can be a rank insider as well as a rank outsider. Home is the place where, when you have to go there, they have to take you in. I hold it to be the inalienable right of anybody to go to hell in his own way. A jury consists of 12 persons chosen to decide who has the better lawyer. There is one thing more exasperating than a wife who can cook and won't, and that's a wife who can't cook and will. There never was any heart truly great and generous, that was not also tender and compassionate. The best things and best people rise out of their separateness. I'm against a homogenized society because I want the cream to rise. No memory of having starred atones for later disregard, or keeps the end from being hard. Talking is a hydrant in the yard and writing is a faucet upstairs in the house. Opening the first takes the pressure off the second. A poet never takes notes. You never take notes in a love affair. Being the boss anywhere is lonely. Being a female boss in a world of mostly men is especially so. Poets are like baseball pitchers. Both have their moments. The intervals are the tough things. The father is always a Republican toward his son, and his mother's always a Democrat. The chief reason for going to school is to get the impression fixed for life that there is a book side for everything. Take care to sell your horse before he dies. The art of life is passing losses on. Nobody was ever meant to remember or invent what he did with every cent. Something we were withholding made us weak, until we found it was ourselves. The question that he frames in all but words is what to make of a diminished thing. Unless you are educated in metaphor, you are not safe to be let loose in the world. Families break up when they get hints you don't intend and miss hints that you do. You're always believing ahead of your evidence. What was the evidence I could write a poem? I just believed it. The most creative thing in us is to believe in a thing. You've got to love what's lovable, and hate what's hateable. It takes brains to see the difference. Education doesn't change life much. It just lifts trouble to a higher plane of regard. My goal in life is to unite my avocation with my vocation, as my two eyes make one in sight. It looked as if a night of dark intent was coming, and not only a night, an age. Someone had better be prepared for rage. The hurt is not enough, I long for weight and strength. To feel the earth as rough to all my length. So was I once myself a swinger of birches. And so I dream of going back to be. He says the best way out is always through. And I can agree to that, or in so far, as that I can see no way out but through. Our very life depends on everything's recurring till we answer from within. In 3 words I can sum up everything I've learned about life, it goes on. Never be bullied into silence. Never allow yourself to be made a victim. Accept no one's definition of your life, define yourself. They cannot scare me with their empty spaces between stars, on stars where no human race is. I have it in me so much nearer home to scare myself with my own desert places. The heart can think of no devotion greater than being sure to the ocean holding the curve of one position, counting an endless repetition. Forgive, O Lord, my little jokes on thee and I'll forgive thy great big one on me. There are 2 kinds of teachers, the kind that fill you with so much quail shot that you can't move, and the kind that just gives you a little prod behind and you jump to the skies. How many things have to happen to you before something occurs to you? Before I built a wall I'd ask to know what I was walling in or walling out. You've got to love what's lovable, and hate what's hateable. It takes brains to see the difference. Writing free verse is like playing tennis with the net down. The hurt is not enough, I long for weight and strength. To feel the earth as rough to all my length. Life must be kept up at a great rate in order to absorb any considerable amount of learning. Earth's the right place for love. I don't know where it's likely to go better. He thought that I was after him for a feather, the white one in his tail, like one who takes everything said as personal to himself. What but design of darkness to appall? If design govern in a thing so small. So I took the road less traveled by and that has made all the difference. The line storm clouds fly tattered and swift, the road is forlorn all day. If it is without her seriousness, it must be within her humor. If it is without her humor, it must be within her seriousness. Neither one alone without the other under it will do. Heaven gives its glimpses only to those not in position to look too close. We saw the risk we took in doing good, but dared not spare to do the best we could. Men work together, I told him from the heart, whether they work together or apart. I'd like to get away from Earth a while and then come back to it and begin over. Come, be my love in the wet woods, come, where the boughs rain when it blows. My definition of literature would be just this, words that have become deeds. New is a word for fools in towns who think, style upon style in dress and thought at last, must get somewhere. I shan't catch up in this world, anyway. I'd rather you'd not go unless you must. How countlessly they congregate o'er our tumultuous snow, which flows in shapes as tall as trees when wintry winds do blow. I have walked out in rain, and back in rain. I have outwalked the furthest city light. This saying goodbye on the edge of the dark and the cold to an orchard so young in the bark reminds me of all that can happen. And poems are all that matter. The utmost of ambition is to lodge a few poems where they will be hard to get rid of. I end not far from my going forth by picking the faded blue 15 of the last remaining aster flower to carry again to you. More than once I should have lost my soul to radicalism if it had been the originality it was mistaken for by its young converts. And on the worn book of old golden I brought not here to read, it seems, but hold and freshen in this air of withering sweetness. There ought to be a view around the world from such a mountain. I could say elves to him, but it's not elves exactly, and I'd rather he said it for himself. The realist always falls in love with a girl he has grown up with, the romanticist with a girl from off somewhere. Nature is cruel, it's man who's as sick of blood and man doesn't seem so very sick of it. Something there is that doesn't love a wall that sends the frozen ground swell under it. It is far better for a man to go wrong in freedom than to go right in chains.